I've worked with leadership teams at companies worth over $1 billion. Here's the truth. 99% of leadership development is complete crap. They teach theory that sounds amazing in a conference room, but you know the experience. It falls apart as soon as Monday morning hits. But the companies that actually scale from 6 to 7 figures, from 7 figures to billions of dollars, they use a completely different system. And it's a leadership system that can absolutely transform any company and allow it to scale consistently. In today's video, I'm breaking down the exact leadership framework I teach to 9-figure CEOs and their teams. By the end of this video, you'll have the complete blueprint to copy it in your own organization starting today. I'm Jake Thompson, and for the past decade, I've worked with over 100 organizations, helping them build competitive cultures that actually drive results. It's not about pep rallies, it's about positive change, and I want to show you how it works. The first pillar in our program is compete. Now, after working with more than 100 organizations, I discovered something critical about competition. If you can do it right, it can absolutely transform your culture. But if you do it wrong, it destroys them. Here's the core concept that most leaders miss. You have to model a me versus me mentality before you can expect it from your teams. Let me tell you about this one CEO I worked with. This guy was obsessed, and I mean obsessed, with beating everyone else. His team was stressed out, burnout, and he was losing his top performers left and right. The first thing that we did was reset his focus off of everyone else onto competing with his own previous best performance as a leader. What we saw over the next quarter is that his team's energy started to transform. He changed how he talked about his competition. He changed what he was doing every day. The reality is you can't lead others to their best unless you're actively competing for your own. Here's what you can start to implement today. Ask yourself this question. How can I be a better leader than I was yesterday? Not worrying about that competitor down the street, not worrying about this idea of what it should look like in your head, but a better leader than you were yesterday. Pick something very specific. Track something very specific. The more we clarify what being a great leader looks like and the action steps that create it, the more specifically that we can build toward becoming it. Maybe it's how you start meetings. Maybe it's the way you give feedback. Maybe it's how present you are in the conversations instead of waiting to respond. The moment you start competing with yourself, your team notices. And the best part is, once you model the behavior, they can start to follow it themselves. A competitive mindset is crucial foundation for building any winning culture. And in order to lead people effectively, you first have to lead yourself. The second pillar in our framework is the connection. Here's the one thing successful CEOs know that a lot of leaders miss. If you want to build a world-class team, you actually have to connect with them as humans. This is why some leaders have their teams willing to walk through fire and other teams struggle to get any buy-in or show up to a meeting on time. The core concept here is leadership influence is built through intentional relational investment. Two of the best examples I've seen of this is the first, on one hand, the former CEO of Nebraska Furniture Mart used to call every employee on their birthday. Over 2,000 employees, yet he would still make time each day to personally call and wish everyone a happy birthday. Boy, what a signal he made to each employee about how valuable they are, how appreciated they are, and how much they're seen. On the other hand, a friend of mine who is a VP at a construction company recently joined another organization. They were acquired, and as part of that transition process, he was called down to Houston, Texas to spend time with the new C-suite that he'd be answering to. On Friday afternoon, he gets the call. He asks, "What do I need to prepare for?" "Nothing, just know your people," is all they told him. Monday morning, he shows up in Houston. He sits down at a desk with the entire C-suite around him, and the CEO slides a piece of paper across the table to him. As he looks down at that paper, he realizes that's his org chart. It's all 75 people within his division that ultimately report up to him. As he looked at the sheet, he looked back at the CEO, who smiled and said, "Tell us about your people." At this point, my friend just laughed because he knew his people. He had spent time having coffee, building relationships, taking people to lunch, getting to know them beyond just what's their role and what's the work required of them. He got to know them as individual people. What this specific person understood is that the more I can make relational deposits in you so that you feel appreciated, you feel seen, that we're connected and you're not just a number on payroll, the more bought in you're gonna be into what we're trying to do, and the more leadership influence I'm gonna be able to cultivate you and continue and develop you. One of the best ways for this is what we call the coffee and connection. We've implemented this with a number of organizations, and it's a really simple system. You spend 10 to 15 minutes every week with a direct report, just talking to them. Not about work, not about problems, not about performance metrics, but who they are. What are their goals? What do they want to achieve? Tell me about your family. Help me get to know you. The cool part about this is Harvard estimated there's only 2 reasons we communicate as humans. The first is to learn information. The second is to increase our likability. And do you want to know the best way you can increase your likability with others? It's to ask a really good follow-up question. See, if we ask an open-ended question and then we follow up with another good question, we've sent a signal to that person that we're talking to. Not only am I listening to you, but I'm interested in what you have to say. I'm interested in you. And something in our brains go off in that moment and says, ooh, I like this person a little bit more. Here's the truth. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. The easiest way to get to people's heads is actually through their heart. So here's what I want you to implement today. Pull out your calendar and block off time for 10 to 15 minutes to spend with your direct report. Ask them, what's something going well in your life right now that has nothing to do with work? And then just listen. Don't try to solve anything. Don't give them advice. Just be present with them as a human being and watch what happens to their engagement over the next month. This next pillar is one of my favorites because it's really what separates good leaders from great ones. The third pillar in the formula is coach. This is one of the biggest mindset shifts that great leaders have to make, especially as you go from performer to manager and then manager to leader, because it starts by doing the exact opposite of what most people do. Shift from giving answers to asking questions that develop thinking. I was working with a VP once who was working 60 to 70 hour weeks because he always solved the problems for his team. Like every time they came to him, he solved the problem. We talked to him about shifting the conversation instead of immediately giving advice to asking them, what do you think we should do next time? Instead of giving that immediate solution, what he was doing was giving them the opportunity to think through solutions and learn. The time he worked shifted downward. The amount of problems his team started solving on their own shifted upwards. See, here's the framework. Instead of saying, here's what you should do, start asking, what options do you see? What would you recommend in this spot? What do you think we should do? The next time someone brings you a problem, resist that urge to just immediately solve it, immediately right there on the spot. I know, I love solving problems. But instead ask them, walk me through what you're thinking. Why would you try that first? See, what happens in those moments, you're not abandoning them as their leader, you're actually developing them. You're giving them the space to grow. Now here's the deal. The last pillar is what holds this entire system together. If you miss this, it's really hard to create meaningful progress in your leadership journey. The fourth pillar is consistency, right? There's 2 things that hold this entire leadership system together of competing and connecting and coaching. And without these, everything else falls apart. The core concept, leadership consistency in your attitude, your standards, and your follow through. You can't just do it once. You can't do it when you feel motivated. You got to be consistent. I worked with one team where a CEO's mood determined the entire office energy. Bad day for him meant bad day for everyone else. What we did was work on building a system that helped him choose his attitude before circumstances, heck, before he even walked in the office, and other things chose it for him. You started to see the shift in the culture pretty quickly because your team is taking their emotional temperature from you. You're either a thermostat, right, where you're setting the tone, or you're a thermometer that's reacting to everything else around you. And your team is feeding off of you. If you're stressed, they're stressed. If you're confident, they're confident. And if you're inconsistent with your standards, they become inconsistent with their performance. So here's what you can implement today. Before you walk into your office or join your first meeting, ask yourself, be intentional. What kind of energy do I want to bring to my team today? What's the attitude I want them to catch from me? And then make the conscious choice about how you're going to show up. Not based on your circumstances, not based on what happened to you this morning, but based on the leader your team needs you to be. Also, pick that one standard you're going to absolutely be consistent in this week. Maybe it's starting your meetings on time. Maybe it's following through with those accountability conversations. Heck, maybe it's just how you publicly respond to setbacks. Your consistency can create their confidence. The foundation of being a great leader is competing with yourself. But what are you supposed to do when the bad days happen? What happens when something falls apart, the team fails? How do you make sure you're still competing when everything else just seems to go like crap? That's exactly what I talk about in my free resource at coffee.competeeveryday.com. I'm going to give you this 4-letter framework that's going to help you reset and get back on track when those difficult days hit. And I'm also going to give you the opportunity to build that coffee and connection piece. You're going to get your very own questionnaire of 20 questions you can ask your team members and a way to track that information so you can reference back to it. Here's the reality. Every leader faces bad days. The difference between great leaders and poor ones is what you do when they happen. Head to coffee.competeeveryday.com. Grab both of those free resources. And if this video helped you, if it made you think, if it challenged you to do something different, do me a favor and share it with one leader who needs to hear this message. Remember, high performance isn't an event, it's a culture. And that culture starts with you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.